Dear Evelyn, they told you I ran away that Tuesday morning. I heard you calling my name through the open windows, your voice growing more desperate as evening fell, but I never meant to leave you. Not like that. I was just following the scent of rain on the breeze, padding down to where the creek bends behind Hawthorne Street. That's when the pain came, sudden and sharp, stealing my breath away. I tried to come home to you, Evelyn. I made it halfway up the hill before my legs refused to carry me further. I thought of your face as the world went quiet around me. I was found by Mrs. Caldwell's grandson. Just another stray. They probably told you, but we both know better, don't we? 14 years is never just anything. Sometimes I wonder if you knew somehow, if that's why you still set out my blue ceramic bowl each morning for weeks after. If that's why you'd sit on the porch swing each evening, letting it creak back and forth, as if keeping time with a promise. I hope you felt me there beside you, even when you couldn't see me anymore. There's something I need you to know. Something I never found a way to tell you when I could still curl against your lap and feel your gentle fingers trace the notch in my left ear. You saved me in ways that went beyond that rainy April morning when you found me. But I'm getting ahead of myself. You used to joke that we found each other like two puzzle pieces that had fallen from different boxes, somehow fitting perfectly despite the odds. You never knew how right you were. Do you remember that day? The shelter in Windham County was closing down. You weren't even looking for a cat. You'd gone to drop off those old blankets from your mother's cedar chest. I was the scraggly, one-eyed tomcat in the corner cage, the one the volunteers called unfriendly, 8 years old and running out of chances. That one's not good with people, the woman told you. Been returned twice. What they didn't say was that I'd been waiting, not just for anyone, for you. You knelt down in front of my cage, and I remember how you didn't try to coax me forward or make those high-pitched sounds people often use for animals. You just looked at me with those clear grey eyes of yours and said, "Well, you've seen some things, haven't you?" And then you did something no one else had done. You waited. You let the silence stretch between us like an offering. When they opened my cage, everyone expected me to retreat to the back corner as usual. Instead, I limped forward and pressed my head against your outstretched hand. The shelter volunteer gasped. But you just nodded, as if confirming something you'd known all along. His name is Winston, you told them, though they'd been calling me Max for years. And just like that, I became Winston of Meadowlark Lane, the one-eyed cat who belonged to Evelyn Porter. I didn't make it easy at first. Those early weeks I hid beneath your bed during the day, emerging only after you'd fallen asleep. I'd pace the perimeter of your small house, learning its rhythms and scents. The cedar chest in the spare room, the windowsill in the kitchen where the afternoon sun created the perfect warm spot, the subtle creak of the third stair that would later become our shared signal, me making it groan deliberately when I wanted your attention, you stepping on it to let me know you were coming downstairs on those dark mornings. You never pushed, never demanded, you just went about your routines, talking to me as if I could understand every word. And I did, Evelyn. Not the words themselves, perhaps, but the meaning behind them. The gentle patience in your voice as you read your students' essays aloud in the evenings. The way you'd laugh at yourself when you burned the toast for the third morning in a row. Do you remember the thunderstorm that finally broke the barrier between us? 6 weeks after you brought me home, lightning cracked the sky open, and I forgot all my careful independence. I raced up onto your bed, trembling from whiskers to tail. You simply lifted the quilt, your grandmother's wedding quilt, and made space beside you. "It's all right to be afraid sometimes, Winston," you whispered. "We all are." I slept curled against your chest that night and every night after. That was the beginning of our language, wasn't it? The quiet understanding that grew between us over the years. How you always seemed to know which days my old injuries ached the most, placing the heating pad on the window seat without a word. How I learned to nudge your hand away from the phone when your sister called with her latest drama. The way I'd sit on your grade book when you'd been working too long, making you laugh even on your most exhausted evenings. Our life together wasn't extraordinary by most measures. No grand adventures or dramatic moments that others would find remarkable. Just the gentle accumulation of days spent in the company of someone who saw you clearly and loved you anyway. But in those ordinary moments, Evelyn, we created something rare and precious. Remember how we'd spend Sunday mornings? You with your coffee and crossword puzzle, me curled in the square of sunlight that moved across the living room floor. The radio playing those old jazz records your father loved. Sometimes you'd look up from your puzzle and catch me watching you, and your face would soften into that smile that seemed reserved just for me. "What are you thinking about, old man?" you'd ask. If only I could have told you then how I memorized every line of your face in those moments, storing them away like treasures. You never married, never brought home the children your mother kept hinting you should have. Sometimes neighbors or colleagues would comment on your solitary life with a touch of pity in their voices. "Just Evelyn and her cat," they'd say, as if our small household was somehow incomplete. But we knew better, didn't we? Some afternoons when you'd return from teaching and sink into your armchair with a sigh, kicking off those sensible shoes and wiggling your toes in relief, I'd watch contentment settle over you like a favorite blanket. "It's good to be home, Winston," you'd murmur, and the fullness of that simple statement would fill the room. I think that's what I want you to understand most. That despite what others might have seen or said, you were never just anything. Not to me. You were the center of my world, the person who taught me that safety wasn't just about shelter and food, but about being seen exactly as you are. Life moved forward in its gentle way. The seasons turned, the neighborhood children grew taller, and gradually, almost imperceptibly, we both began to slow down. You retired from teaching after 32 years, though you continued tutoring at the library 2 afternoons a week. "Keeps my mind sharp," you'd tell Mrs. Abernathy when she suggested you should fully retire. But I knew it was more than that. Those children with their struggling eyes and uncertain smiles needed the patience you had in abundance. I was slowing down too, sleeping more hours of the day, taking more careful stock of the jumps I could manage. Remember how you noticed, without my having to tell you, the little step stool that appeared beside the sofa, the way my food bowl migrated from the floor to the counter, saving me the discomfort of bending my stiff neck. You never made a fuss about these accommodations, never made me feel diminished by them. You just quietly adjusted our world to make space for my changing abilities. There was that winter, my 12th with you, when I fell ill. The veterinarian in Coopersville didn't offer much hope. "At his age," she said gently, "with his history." You nodded, understanding the unspoken prognosis, but you brought me home anyway. You set up a bed for me near the heating vent and fed me chicken broth from an eyedropper every 2 hours. For 3 days and nights, you barely slept, reading aloud from Jane Austen as if the familiarity of the words could tether me to this world. On the 4th morning, I managed to eat a small piece of salmon on my own. The relief that flooded your face made your eyes shine. "There you are," you whispered, stroking my head with such tenderness that I found the strength to purr for the first time in days. "I knew you weren't ready to leave me just yet. You were right. I fought my way back from that illness for you, Evelyn, for the chance to share a few more seasons in our quiet house on Meadowlark Lane. And we did have more time, didn't we? More Sunday crosswords and afternoon naps. More evenings on the porch swing, watching fireflies rise from the grass like slow, earthbound stars. But time is the one thing we can't bargain with, no matter how deeply we love. Last spring, when the dogwoods were just beginning to bloom, I noticed the first signs that our roles were shifting. The way you sometimes paused in the middle of a sentence, searching for a word that had momentarily slipped away. How you'd open the refrigerator and stand looking inside, a small frown creasing your forehead as you tried to remember what you needed. The afternoon you returned from the grocery store without the tea you'd specifically gone to purchase. Small things easily dismissed, but I watched you carefully in those months, saw the flash of frustration in your eyes when you misplaced your reading glasses for the third time in a day. Noticed how you started writing more notes to yourself, little reminders taped to the kitchen cabinets and the bathroom mirror. I tried to help in my limited way, sitting beside your purse when you were searching for it, nudging your pill container toward you at breakfast when you'd forgotten your medication. Do you remember the morning you found yourself standing in the hallway, unsure of where you were headed? I saw the momentary panic in your eyes, the disorientation that made your hands tremble. I wound myself around your ankles, purring loudly, giving you something to focus on besides the fear. You knelt down to stroke my fur, and by the time you straightened up again, the moment had passed. You never mentioned it, but you made a doctor's appointment that afternoon. The diagnosis came in early summer. Mild cognitive impairment, the doctor called it. Possibly the early stages of something more serious. You sat in your garden that evening, the paper from the doctor's office folded neatly on the table beside you. I jumped onto your lap, a feat that required more effort these days, and pressed my face against your hand until you began to stroke my fur automatically. "It'll be all right, Winston," you said after a long silence. "We'll manage, as we always have." But there was a catch in your voice that hadn't been there before, and I wished more than ever that I could speak the words that might comfort you. Instead, I stayed closer than ever. When you woke disoriented in the night, I was there, a warm presence against your side. When you forgot to eat lunch, I'd sit by the refrigerator, meowing until you remembered. Small reminders, small comforts. It wasn't enough. It could never be enough against what was coming, but it was what I had to give. Your niece Abigail started visiting more regularly, her concerned gaze following you around the house. She made gentle suggestions about living arrangements and assistance, words that made your shoulders stiffen and your mouth tighten into a thin line. "I'm perfectly fine in my own home," you'd insist. "I have everything I need right here." And your hand would find my fur as if I were evidence of your self-sufficiency. But we both knew things were changing. The afternoon you left the stove on, filling the kitchen with gas that made my eyes water and my chest tighten. The morning you put your sweater on inside out and couldn't understand why it felt wrong. The day you called me Thomas, your childhood cat, and then sat down suddenly, tears filling your eyes as the confusion cleared. "I don't want to leave this house, Winston," you confided one evening as we sat watching the sunset from your bedroom window. "All my memories are here. All our memories." I pressed my head against your hand, trying to tell you that memories aren't contained in walls and floors, but in the spaces between heartbeats. In the quiet moments of connection that defy language. When Abigail brought the pamphlets about assisted living facilities, you didn't immediately push them away as you had before. You looked through them slowly, your fingers tracing the pictures of smiling seniors in bright community rooms. "They don't allow pets," you said finally, closing the glossy brochure. "So that settles that. But life has a way of making decisions for us, doesn't it? The fall on the kitchen floor. The hours you spent alone before Mrs. Brennan heard my desperate cries and called for help. The hospital stay that stretched from days into weeks. When you came home, Abigail came with you. And I knew from the careful way she helped you settle into your armchair that this was temporary. A transition. I could see it in the packed boxes in the spare room, in the photographs being carefully wrapped in tissue paper, in the way you looked around your home with a mixture of love and grief, as if already saying goodbye. You worried about me, I know. I heard you and Abigail talking late into the night about options, the no-kill shelter in Rockford, the neighbor's college-age daughter who'd expressed interest. But I was 14 years old, set in my ways, with one eye and arthritis that made my movements increasingly stiff. We both knew the truth of what would likely happen. The night before you were scheduled to move to Willow Ridge, You sat on your bed with me beside you, stroking my fur with trembling fingers. I wish I could explain it to you, you whispered. I wish you could understand that I don't want to leave you. Your tears fell onto my fur, and I pressed closer, purring as loudly as my old body would allow, understanding everything, forgiving everything. That last morning is etched into my memory with perfect clarity. The gentle May sunshine streaming through the windows. The moving men, careful but efficient as they loaded the few pieces of furniture you'd be taking with you. Abigail's kind efficiency as she directed the process, making sure your medications and favorite sweater were easily accessible for the drive. And you, sitting in the kitchen with me on your lap one last time. Mrs. Brennan will come by twice a day to feed you, you told me, your voice steady despite the tears in your eyes. And Abigail promised to check on you whenever she's in town. You pressed your face against my fur. This is still your home, Winston, for as long as you need it. When it was time to leave, you carefully set me on my cushion by the window, my favorite spot in the afternoon sun. You kissed the top of my head, right between my ears, the way you had thousands of times before. Be good, old friend, you whispered. And then you were gone, the door closing behind you with a soft, final click. I waited by the window for hours, watching as the shadows lengthened across the yard. I knew you weren't coming back, not really, not to stay, but some part of me kept vigil anyway. Mrs. Brennan came that evening with food I didn't touch. She stroked my head and spoke in the gentle tones people use when they think you're suffering. But she couldn't understand that I wasn't angry or confused by your absence, just resolved. That night, I made my slow, careful way around our home. The empty spaces where your bookshelves had stood. The faint impression in the carpet where your reading chair had sat for 20 years. The closet that still held the lingering scent of your lavender sachets. I was memorizing it all, tucking away these final impressions of our shared life. By morning, I knew what I needed to do. When Mrs. Brennan opened the door, I slipped past her ankles and out into the dewy grass. She called after me, but I kept moving with a determination that belied my aging joints. Down Meadowlark Lane, past the Hendersons' white picket fence and the maple tree where the blue jays nested each spring, toward the main road that led out of our neighborhood, toward Willow Ridge. I'd never gone this far from home before, but something pulled me forward. Not hope. I was too old and too wise for that particular comfort, but purpose, perhaps, the need to complete this journey we'd started together all those years ago at the shelter. The day grew warmer as I made my slow progress along the shoulder of the road. Cars passed occasionally, but I kept to the tall grass, invisible to all but the most careful observers. By afternoon, my legs were trembling with exhaustion, and I found a sheltered spot beneath a culvert to rest. I dreamed of you that night, Evelyn. Not as you were in those final confused months, but as you had been that first night during the thunderstorm, strong and certain, making space for me beside you without question. In my dream, you were reading aloud, your voice rising and falling in the familiar cadence that had been the soundtrack to our evenings together. I curled closer to the warmth of that memory as the temperature dropped around my physical form. Morning came with struggle. My body, faithful companion that it had been, was finally reaching its limits. Still, I continued, more slowly now, past the gas station at the edge of town, past the elementary school where you'd taught for so many years. Each step a small act of devotion. I don't know if you'll believe what happened next, Evelyn. I barely believe it myself. But as I paused at an intersection, uncertain of which way to turn, a familiar car slowed beside me. The window rolled down, and there was Abigail, her eyes widening in shock as she recognized me. "Winston," she breathed, pulling her car to the side of the road. "How on earth?" She was out of the car in an instant, kneeling beside me on the gravel. "You're looking for her, aren't you? Oh, you loyal old soul." The next thing I knew, I was wrapped in a soft blanket, cradled in Abigail's arms, as she placed me gently on the passenger seat of her car. I was just heading to see her, she told me, her voice thick with emotion. She's been asking about you. The drive to Willow Ridge passed in a blur. I was too exhausted to do more than lie still, my breathing shallow but steady. When Abigail carried me through the entrance of the facility, a nurse started to object, but something in Abigail's expression silenced her. And then we were there, in a small but sunny room with familiar photographs on the dresser. And you, oh Evelyn, you were sitting in a chair by the window, your face turned toward the light. Thinner than you had been, somehow smaller, but unmistakably you. Aunt Evelyn, Abigail said softly, look who I found. You turned, confusion briefly crossing your face before recognition dawned like sunrise. Winston, you whispered, your voice cracking. Is it really you? Abigail placed me gently in your lap, and I summoned my remaining strength to lift my head, to meet your gaze with my one good eye. Your hands, still gentle, still familiar despite new tremors, stroked my fur with wonder. How did he find me? You asked, looking up at your niece with tears streaming down your face. How is this possible? Abigail just shook her head, her own eyes bright with emotion. I found him on Maple Street, halfway here. He was coming to you, Aunt Evelyn. He was coming home. That afternoon remains the most precious gift of my long life. The way you held me close, whispering stories of our years together. Some details you confused, some names had slipped away. But the core of us, what we had been to each other, remained intact within you. I purred against your chest, feeling your heartbeat against mine, two old rhythms finding synchronicity one last time. The staff made an exception that night, allowing me to stay with you. They brought a small bed for me, but we both knew I wouldn't use it. As darkness fell, I claimed my rightful place beside you, curled against your side, as I had been for 14 years. I thought I'd lost you, you murmured, your fingers gently stroking the notch in my ear. I couldn't remember if I'd said goodbye properly. I pressed my face against your hand, trying to tell you that some bonds don't require proper goodbyes, that what we'd shared transcended the usual boundaries between species, between words and silence, between presence and memory. I don't know if you understood what was happening as the night deepened around us. If you sensed that my breathing was growing more labored, that each purr required more effort than the last. But you kept your hand on my fur, kept speaking to me in that soft voice that had been my compass for so long. Thank you for finding me again, you said, as moonlight spilled across the bed. Thank you for everything, my Winston. Those were the last words I heard in this life, Evelyn, the most perfect farewell I could have wished for. I slipped away in the early hours of morning, still curled beside you, still wrapped in the warmth of your love. I'm told that when the morning nurse found us, you were still sleeping peacefully, your hand resting on my still form. That when they tried to take me away, you clutched my fur and whispered, "Not yet." That you insisted on holding me until Abigail arrived, your tears falling silently, but your face somehow peaceful. They buried me beneath the oak tree behind Willow Ridge, where the afternoon sun creates dappled shadows on the grass. Abigail brought my blue ceramic bowl and placed it beside the small stone marker, an unconventional memorial that made the groundskeeper raise his eyebrows, but one that would have made perfect sense to us. I don't know if you'll ever read these words, Evelyn, if they'll reach you through the fog that's gradually claiming more of your memories, but I needed you to know that I fulfilled my promise, the one I made silently that stormy night, when you first made space for me beside you. I stayed until the very end. I came back to you when it mattered most, and if there are moments when you feel a weight settle at the foot of your bed, or hear the faint echo of a purr when no cat is present, or sense a familiar presence beside you as you watch the sunset, know that it's me, still keeping my promise, still beside you, as I have always been, as I will always be, with eternal devotion, your Winston.